Thanks for coming to join us this afternoon. Now, when Ayawaso West Wuogon MP Emmanuel Tremantin Ejako died last year, it was a moment of sadness, not only for his family or his constituents, but for the entire country. It was going to open ourselves and our eyes to many things which were thought to be hidden, and also spark the setting up of a commission of inquiry into a violent incident which will expose the lapses in the country's security setup. It was the East Legon police commander in whose testimony the massive security gaps began to be exposed.
This particular instance, I was of the view that the authorities, the regional command, would allow the normal system to operate. But this time round, it did not happen, to the extent that I complained that why is it that as a district officer, where a by-election is going to be held, I have been asked to stay aside. Said that my command car was taken away from me by the regional commander, that I should let my driver bring the pickup to Accra region.
You said you were left out of the election duty. Did you ask why?
Yes, my lord. I did indicate in my earlier submission that I asked Mr. Akwesi, the Chief Subtenant, Mr. Akwesi, the one in charge, Accra Regional Operations, as to why my name is not part of the task force group. And he told me I shouldn't worry.
He said,
I shouldn't worry.
You shouldn't worry.
Yes.
You are the district commander of a place where an election is going to take place, and a list of officers to take part in the activities is drawn up. Your name is not on it.
Yes, my lord.
You inquire why, who drew up the list to begin with?
It's Chief Subtenant Mr. Akwesi and the regional commander.
He himself.
They did it in his office.
They did it in whose office? Who is his?
Chief Subtenant Mr. Akwesi.
Drew up the list?
Yes, my lord.
So you asked him why your name was not on it?
Yes, my lord.
And
at Accra region, that I shouldn't worry.
You shouldn't worry?
Yes, my lord.
And you left it at that?
Yes. I left it in the sense that they are in charge. And even my car, they've asked me to bring it to Accra region. And in our work, you can't challenge authority.
Yeah. Now, following that, some of the country's security chiefs also appeared before the Emil Short Commission and were confronted with the same issue about the lack of proper coordination. First, the IGP, David Asante Apietu, then the Interior Minister, Ambrose Dere, before the commission.
I am not disputing the fact that my regional commanders and others didn't know about this. I also did not know about this operation. So I side with them. But to patrol within the unit with that inscription, police, definitely individual police officers who have been deployed at the polling station may not have any cause to complain about it because it has the police inscription on the vehicles that they were using.
Chief, you will agree with me, won't you, that if that is the case, then any group at all can masquerade themselves as police, get a vehicle with police insignia without a GP number, come in there, perpetuate whatever activity they wanted to, and go back without the police noticing?
Yes, I agree with you. That is, if the police have not been informed about this operation, definitely. And it means that anybody could also pass for any police operational unit and do whatever they want to do. I agree with you.
Chief, you will also agree with me that this is a clear evidence of lack of cooperation and coordination within the internal security organizations.
I do not disagree with you.
Going forward, what do you think we should do as far as this is concerned?
Well, there's a lot of room for improvement as far as coordination and collaboration is concerned.
Right. So today we put the spotlight on the structure of the country's security, and we want to find out whether the security architecture provides enough safety for the ordinary Ghanaian and for the state. So let's begin by looking at security institutions that are in place today. Let's take a quick look through some of these images. Now, amongst when it comes to our security structure, we of course have the National Security Council at the top, where the president is the chairman, vice president is the deputy chair, and then it has security ministers for the Interior, Defense, and National Security Ministry under this administration. And then we have a National Security Advisor or Coordinator, or in some cases both. We have heads of various units, the police, the military, immigration, prisons, fire, and then there are some appointees of the president. When you go down to the Regional Security Council level, you have the regional minister, the regional security liaison officer who reports to the National Security Advisor or Coordinator. We have the regional commanders for various services, police, fire, immigration, and so forth. They form the Regional Security Council. There are some other members as well, but in terms of the sort of the state architecture, these would be the main members at that level. So that's the generality of our security structures. And then we have the replication of this at the district level, where we would have the district chief executive or mayors with the district liaison officers and so forth. There we go, chief executive, metropolitan, municipal, and district assemblies. And then we have the district police commanders and other security agencies all represented, including MPs for relevant constituencies. So that's the general architecture from top down of our security structure. Now, among the president's appointees at the top, at the council level, National Security Council, would be the Minister for National Security, Minister of State, National Security, Interior Minister, Defense Minister. But let me ask you this. In this abundance of ministers and appointees, all to deal with security, do you know who to call in case of a terror attack, for example, or a kidnapping? Well, I don't know. I'm going to guess that you don't either. And that's what we're going to decode today. We're going to have a crack panel to help us do this. In the studio with us, we're very happy to have him, Mr. Prosper Ni Norte Addo. He's a security analyst. He's based in Liberia, so he's certainly seen some security scenarios that can certainly help us understand how our situation ought to be. Very nice to meet you, Mr. Addo. Thank you very much for your time with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So when we look at our setup, we see confusion. But what do you see?
I think we're growing our democracy, and given that it is a human institution that we're running, there are bound to be challenges. Perhaps the most important thing we should be asking is, do we have the institutions doing what is expected of them to ensure that there's some level of stability in the country?
Right, so when we take our specific situation, we have a National Security Council that's supposed to be the security overarching body. The president is right there as the chair. The Constitution says it must be so. And then the Constitution says that whichever minister is responsible for national security must be on that council as well. Now, in previous administration, the minister in charge of national security was not a designated national security minister. It was rather our interior minister. In this administration, we have a designated national security minister. We also have a minister of state at the office of the president responsible for national security. He's also there. Do you see perhaps the potential for crossed lines and, overlapping duties and perhaps a difficulty in reporting structure?
Let me start by saying that the president has the prerogative to designate who should be the Minister for National Security. And so, like you said, sometimes the Minister for Interior could do or perform that function. But having said that, in this current setup, yes, like you rightly said, we do have a Minister for National Security. Of course, there's a Minister for the Interior. And then there's a Minister of State in the office of the President also. The President, in his judgment and in his wisdom, made these appointments. He would have specific reasons. For me, what I can say is that with all these arrangements in place, are we achieving the purpose for having this current arrangement? If we are, then certainly something is, it's working well. But if we are not, then we have to relook and perhaps advise.
But you're here to help us find answers. You've got questions too. We want the answers though. You have analyzed the situation here. You've watched what we saw when the commission had its sitting and all these people appeared and there were all these conflicting reports and so forth. So in your expert analysis of our situation today, is this system working?
I don't think so. Well, I can say yes and no. Yes, to the extent that there's still peace and stability in the country. So that is a plus. And
we already had that. So,
yes,
it's not an achievement of this
But no, to sustain
arrangement, is it?
It must not be taken for granted. We have it, yes. It can derail. And so for the fact that we're doing everything possible to make sure that we are maintaining peace and stability, it's important. Perhaps there are challenges which we must deal with. And that is why when these things are happening, some of us come on board to share our views. But having said that, let me quickly say that in this current setup, I think, for instance, the Minister of State in the office of the presidency may not be necessary. Given that we have a Minister for National Security, there's supposed to be a National Security Advisor or Coordinator. Of course, the Minister for the Interior. Those three are well cut out. If you take the Security and Intelligence Agencies Act, it's clearly outlined there. The one for the Minister of State in the Office of the President, I haven't seen. And so I think that we could make some rearrangements here and there, but make sure that all these people have specific functions lined out for them to play. And so we make sure we keep them in these roles.
All right, now we have a Minister for Interior, we have a Minister for National Security, we have a Minister of State, the Office of the President responsible for National Security. And then we also have a National Security Coordinator. I've got to ask, where does he come in? Because historically that is a role that is given to someone who is a security professional. Yeah. So we've seen people like Mr. Larry Weblo-Latte in the past hold that position. So under this new dynamic, where does the National Security Advisor or Coordinator, where do they sit?
They play various roles. There is an intelligence arm where you have the BNI, Bureau of National Investigations, and all that. They mainly coordinate the affairs of this particular bureau, which is an internal intelligence agency. But again, the whole idea of that coordinator role is that, the president is so busy, and you need somebody to analyze the situation and break it down for you to make immediate decisions. So these are people who are in the office of the president, who are supposed to have first-hand information on issues of security threats, intelligence and all that, and be able to advise the president in which direction to go.
So the National Security Advisor or Coordinator would report to the president?
Yes.
Not to the Minister for National Security?
No, they could coordinate in certain instances.
Coordinate what though? You're talking about making decisions.
Yes.
About, security threats and so forth. So the minister would not do that?
The minister has specific roles to play. Minister for is the national security, coordinates mostly the intelligence agencies. You know, you have the Minister for the Interior in charge of rule of law, coordinating the Ministry of the Interior, which deals with the police and the other security agencies.
That's right.
You have the defense, the armed forces.
Yeah,
so you
the
have
military.
the defense and the military. So normally the intelligence arm of this whole structure is the Minister for Security. That is and it's all about getting information that could compromise the security of Ghana and ensuring that you take necessary policy measures.
That sounds exactly like what you said the National Security Coordinator would be doing.
Yes, but you know,
so there is an overlap.
There may be an overlap, but rightly so. I mean,
right for us to have an overlap?
The issue is if they can work together and ensure that the security of the country is stable, there's no problem.
So we shouldn't.
It is an issue of reporting lines. Okay.
So we shouldn't be bothered that we're paying two people to do the same job, as long as they can work well together.
We would be bothered if they are not performing their functions properly.
So, like I said, as long as they can work well together, it shouldn't bother us that we're paying them to do the same job.
If you sleep and wake up in peace, would you be bothered?
If I'm paying two people to do the same thing, clearly one of them will not be doing it, but will be taking a salary.
Again, it is the prerogative of the president. He has a constitutional right.
So in your expert analysis, is this a better way of doing it?
I would do it differently.
How would you do it?
I would have, let's say, a Minister for National Security in place, and the other ministries. And I'm sure they can do the job. If I take a National Security Coordinator or advisor, then I'll let him also play that role, you know, in terms of coordinating all these intelligence agencies and all that. But again, if you're sitting where the president is sitting, he sees what he sees. You may not necessarily know. And security is just not an issue of a layman's view. There are other technicalities around it. That's why it's difficult to say here now that, look, just get rid of this. There may be a reason for that. But for me, like I'm saying, if those people in these, the Security and Intelligence Agencies Act makes provision for these roles. So why not? If they are performing their roles, then rightly so. But again, if we are not seeing results, you have a right to ask questions.
So, the way you describe how you would do it, it seems exactly the way the president has done it. It seems you're basically...
Except for the fact that I'm saying that the president has a prerogative to nominate a Minister for National Security. If I'm going to use a National Security Coordinator or advisor, I wouldn't need a Minister for National Security. But he has the option, okay? But for me, if I think that that National Security Coordinator is playing the role effectively, I wouldn't need it. And you could see in other governments, I think in the NDC, for instance, they didn't have a Minister for National Security. But again, the Minister for National Security also has a role which other ministers can play, like we said. And annually, they're supposed to be reporting to Parliament, presenting an annual report on the intelligence agencies, what they are doing, how effective it is. And that is where critical questions are supposed to be asked.
We are in the third year of this country's this government's administration, and the National Security Minister has not appeared before Parliament, has not presented this report.
We should be asking questions. Do we know? Are we aware? And so that is why it's important that...
But wait, which of them would do it? Would it be the Minister for National Security or the Minister of State at the Office of the President responsible for national security? Which of them would...
Okay, I understand your confusion. It is the Minister for National Security. Okay. Now, if there's no elected Minister for National Security or appointed Minister for National Security, then whichever minister is designated by the President to do so would do it.
So in this case, it would be the Minister for National Security, exactly currently so. Mr. Kandapa.
Exactly so.
All right. And he's not done it. He's not appeared before Parliament. Okay. It's been 3 years running. Yeah. In terms of sanctions, are there any? Is there anything that at this point, as a nation concerned with its security, we ought to do to compel this minister to appear before Parliament?
This is spelled out in the Security and Intelligence Agencies Act. And it is a mandate, it is obligatory. And so if it is not being done, I'm sure the parliamentarians know what to do. because they have oversight functions over the security sector. More to that also is that all this is about the people of Ghana. Everybody answers to the people of Ghana. Everybody, they answer to the people of Ghana, the president, ourselves, in all we do. And so it's important that the people of Ghana also ask questions. That's why it's not enough to criticize, but you must know what exactly it is you are talking about, to have the needed information to ask the relevant questions.
All right. Well, now we're hoping that with you here, we'll start to get some of that much needed information. Let's talk about the actual agencies. Perhaps you can educate us on what the functions ought to be of the police as compared to the CID, which I understand is part of the police.
It is.
To the BNI, to national security, which we now see from Ayawaso West Wuogon that they even have a force, an armed force. They call it a SWAT team. To IOCO, and all of these other investigative and law enforcement institutions. Let's go through them. Let's get an education on what each of them is supposed to do.
Okay, so let's, which do we take first?
I'll start with the police and then move down from there.
Generally, as the Constitution rightly says, they're supposed to be maintaining law and order. And so if somebody is going against the rules or the laws in place, they effect arrest and they prosecute. So it's to maintain, that law and order and to enforce the laws. And they do this in partnership with the people. They don't do it alone.
Right.
If you talk about the armed forces, it's about defense, defending the territorial integrity of Ghana. Okay, keeping everybody safe within the borders of Ghana. And again, they can also be used for some development activities if the president so directs. You have the Bureau of, okay, let's talk about intelligence.
Okay.
So you have the BNI, who are basically supposed to be getting information, information that could compromise the security of the state. If there's supposed to be an overthrow of government, BNI must pick it up. If some people are plotting to attack the country and all that, BNI must work with, we have an external intelligence, which falls also under the Research Bureau of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. They are there.
Oh, so we have external intelligence. We have spies.
I don't know how you want to call it, but we do have that. And we even have defense intelligence. Okay, these are all structures that are supposed to make sure that our borders are safe and internally we are all safe. And so you have those three. They must coordinate from both the armed forces, from the police side. You also have the CID that also undertakes some investigations into some of these activities. In this current times, we are having quite a lot of challenges. There's terrorism, okay? You're having kidnapping. You are talking about those girls who have been kidnapped and all that. We're having issues to do with farmer-herder disputes where women are being raped. As a result of that, people are being killed. All these require all these people to work together. And there are so many people within the security sector. We're just talking about the formal. There's also the informal aspect of it, where you have even the traditional councils at the localities, the communities. They are supposed to be working hand in hand with the formal structures to ensure that security is complete. And security now is not myopic, where it's about just maintaining the government in power. It's about everybody having food to eat, water to drink, people walk on the streets well, and all that. So if you
That's all part of what security should concern itself with. Intelligence should concern itself with.
So intelligence is supposed to make sure that those criminal elements who are there wanting to cause confusion, they pick up the information, they analyze it, they pass it to the right quarters for response, and they have all the structures in place. Okay. If you talk about the police, the police are on the roads. They are investigating criminal activities, armed robberies, and all that. We're supposed to be working with them as partners to get things done. If they don't have this support, it will be very difficult for them to do. You have the immigration services in charge of the borders, making sure that people who go in and come are doing so well. You sometimes have people who are doing drug trafficking, human trafficking, even small arms, light weapons. The customs are supposed to be checking the goods, while the migrations are supposed to be checking the movement of human beings in and out. Because, of course, you know, there are criminal elements, transnational organized crime and all that. You talked about IOCO. IOCO is supposed to be making sure that economic and organized crime is prevented, and if it takes place, is detected, and then, based on the authority of the Attorney General, the people who are involved are prosecuted. They are also supposed to make sure that funds which are embezzled as a result of corruption and all that are gotten back. I think in 2015 or so, I read they got back about 2.4 billion Ghana cedis, if my memory serves me right. So these are some of the things that IOCO is supposed to be doing. You talk about the Office of the Special
Prosecutor, yes.
And, you know, I remember the president was in Liberia at a point in time, and I stood up and asked how far this was going. And then the president assured the gathering that, look, everything is going to, then it wasn't established. But now we see it's here. Is it doing its job? The head of that particular outfit mentioned that it's not all cases that can be prosecuted, but it's significant ones. Well, are the significant ones I know it takes time, and you must have sufficient, you know, evidence to be able to prosecute. And so until and unless you have this, you don't go calling people thieves. You must prove it. Okay, so these are some of the functions laid out there, and we must begin to understand what each of these agencies are supposed to be doing.
Right, so let's take some specific examples and see if we can get some education. So we've had some kidnapping cases in Takoradi. Kidnapping. Which institution would take up the natural jurisdiction for this? And then perhaps seek help from others where necessary.
Okay, so it's internal. And so we're talking about the police service.
The police, okay.
Yes. Now, having said that, it's not only the police, and I told you there's informal and there's formal.
Yeah.
So the police must be working with informants. They must be working, if it's a locality, with traditional leaders, traditional councils. We have district security councils. We have a lot of structures, right from the top, bottom. We even have regional houses of chiefs and all that. We have the structures, and they must be used. Do we know this? I don't know. So I think that it's an issue of getting to understand how all these structures are placed, what they are supposed to be doing, and ensuring that they work. Right. And somebody, but let me also bring in a dimension, which is politics. We tend to politicize things just too much, and that is affecting the operation of some of these agencies. And I must appeal that, look, to score political points, there's a stage for that. But when it comes to the collective security of all Ghanaians or the national interest, we must all come together and ensure that the right thing is done. If we tend to just score political points and playing games by saying, well, this did this and this did that, so then there's no problem, then we are in trouble. That is why I think that a lot more needs to be done. Some of these police officers who are supposed to be investigating these crimes sometimes are reluctant because they fall in a line of fire and their family are left to bear the brunt. You see, and so, and also other times when you talk about galamsey and you talk about political militias and all that, some come in the line of fire because then they think that they are dealing with political elements, and if they go after them, they will be. So we have to begin to get a fine balance between politics and allowing these professional or security agencies to do their work very well.
Now let's have another look at that that infographic that we had up on our screen earlier. This was the one that explained the membership of the National Security Council. Let's bring that up. There it is. Okay, now I want us to have a look at this, Prosper. So these are the people who make up the National Security Council.
Yes.
The President, Vice President. Then we have the security ministers, yes. Interior, Defense, National Security, all of them appointed by the President.
Yes.
Then we have the National Security Advisor or Coordinator, also appointed by the President. We have the heads of the various units, police, appointed by the President, military, appointed by the President, all of them. Yeah. And then we have some 2 or 3 appointees that spaces that the president appoints into on the National Security Council. All of them put there by the president.
Yes.
So in essence, we have our national security infrastructure, architecture, all of it supervised by politicians.
Yes.
And it is very possible to have an entire National Security Council that might have no security experts.
Yes.
It is possible.
It is.
Is politics putting the state of our security in jeopardy?
There are 2 sides to it. I can say yes, and I can also say no. You see, if a president is elected, the people give him that power. And that power resides in the people. And so whatever he does must be in the interest of the people. That is one aspect of it. And so he must be in the position to be able to get things down the way he wants. And so I'm sure it is in that thinking and that logic that all these arrangements were made for the president to appoint all these people. Because if you have political leaders, you are easily able to tell them what to do. That's why they are not elected but appointed, because the president must get a job done.
But we know our president is not a security expert.
Fine. So you don't need to be a security person to be put in these positions. That's why I'm saying that. You are there ensuring that what the president wants is being done. You have people to work for you. Are you using the people well, or you are there playing politics?
But if the entire council is made up of political appointees, then can they do anything apart from politics?
They can. There's the possibility to do that. But again, even if you bring in an expert, and without the necessary resources, there could also be a problem. So that is why, if I were in the shoes of the president, I'll do some mixing here and there, because it's helpful if you put an expert. I mean, a minister of defense must be perhaps somebody who has been in the system and worked with the soldiers and all that, the armed forces, and understand the dynamics and all that. But it doesn't also have to be, because the chief of defense staff, who is supposed to be the person who would do the actual job, would guide you, would advise you. And when he's advising you, it's for you to say, okay, this is what the president wants. Are we getting there? Give targets, give indicators. Are they meeting them? If they are not meeting them, get some people out, get some people in to get a job done. And that's why I'm saying that. Normally the political actors are just there to guide the process and direct. They are not there to do their job necessarily, but to make sure that what the president wants is being done. And you have the heads, the IGP, the Chief of Defense Staff, the Director Generals of the prisons, Commissioner of SEPs. All these people are those who are supposed to run these agencies to get results. And then that is why the president also appoints these people, you see.
Now, the one role in the national security apparatus that we have traditionally seen going to someone who is an expert is the National Security Coordinator. Yeah. In the current administration, how prominent, powerful, influential, effective, visible is our National Security Coordinator? I ask this because when the Commission had its sittings, they called probably everybody but the National Security Coordinator. So they called the Minister for National Security, they called the other Minister for National Security, they called the Interior Minister, they even went as far as calling the Director of Operations at National Security. They called police officers, they called the IGP, but they didn't call the National Security Coordinator. And we have one, don't we?
Yes. Again, I wouldn't be in the position to say why he wasn't called, because I wasn't there. But what I said was that in these roles, if there's no need for him to be there, or perhaps at the time he could have been doing something else, I do not know. But what is important is
what does he do though? I mean, you analyze security. So at the moment, in our country, what do you think our National Security Coordinator does?
Like I said, the National Security Coordinator is the one that coordinates those intelligence wing of the whole security architecture. So for instance, you have the BNI, okay, and then you're talking about the defense intelligence. You're talking about, how do we call it, the external intelligence and all that. He's supposed to make sure those people are well resourced to get their job done.
Not the minister.
He coordinates the activity. The minister looks at the policy side of this whole thing. A policy is there, a strategy is mapped out for them to roll out their activities. In rolling out these activities, they are working in their separate roles: internal, external, defense. So the coordinator or the advisor sits in between those three wings and get them to make sure, for instance, if there's an issue of an overthrow being planned, so to speak, he gets in touch with all the three elements. Have you heard anything from outside regarding this? You talk to BNI, intelligence, then you also talk to the defense angle. You sift the information and all that. You advise the president. You coordinate with the minister for. So this is how these things are supposed to be working.
Okay. Educate us on the National Security Council. What sort of decisions do they make at that level? At a council meeting, what sort of things would they be talking about?
You see, there are major things. First is the security of the state. If there is any problem whatsoever in Ghana currently, you would see that President calls a meeting of the National Security Council. And there's a council represented by all these people you talked about who are well informed and should brief the president on what direction to go. And based on all the briefings he gets, he makes a decision on how to contain, for instance, prevent something from happening. If it happens, manage it, and possibly find a solution to it. That's why you have that structure replicated even at the regional and district level. So information sift through to the top. Okay, so in cases where the district is not able to contain some of these, it goes to the regional level and subsequently to the national level. So the national sits and ensures that the peace and stability of the country is not threatened. That's the key thing that they do.
Right. Do they make decisions about how to spend money, for example, in the security, in national security? Say, which institution needs what sort of logistical support and so forth?
It's a policy-making body. Okay, the National Security Council. So they may not go into the details of that. They tell you what is happening and what they want done. And then you have, for instance, the oversight by the Defense Select Committee on Defense and the Interior in Parliament. They look at the budget for the security agencies and make allotment. You also have the Public Account Committee. You also look into some of these issues to ensure that there's accountability, there's transparency and all that. And so everybody has his role designated. And it's there in the Constitution, supported by the Police Act, the Armed Forces Act, the Security and Intelligence. There's even some legislative instruments covering private securities, how to establish a private security company and all that. Okay, so all these things are there.
So we know that national security has an armed force. We now know this.
Yes.
How about that? Is that a provision in the Constitution? Is that something that...
let me get you clear. What do you mean by national security has an armed force?
Well, we saw those who went to Ayawaso.
Oh, the militia you're talking about.
Oh, that's how you would characterize them.
I would characterize it as a militia, because if the Minister of the Interior is not aware of their deployment, they may have been driven in a police designated vehicle, okay, maybe with a police officer and all that. But if the Ministry of the Interior that is supposed to be doing that is not doing that, then I would consider it as perhaps a militia, okay?
But the Minister for National Security, the Minister at the Office of the President responsible for national security, such a mouthful, forgive me, he says he's completely aware of them and he was aware of their deployment that day. So does that still make them a militia if a minister seems to be at the helm of their affairs?
It's a good question. The Constitution makes it clear that nobody raises a police, an armed forces, or whatever without Parliament, authorizing. Now, even if it's a private security company, the Ministry of the Interior must be aware because they have legislative instruments that govern the operation of that. Where do those people fall? That is the first question. If they don't fall within any of this, then there are questions. And that's why I'm saying that for me, they do not fall in any of these, so I would rather see them as militias. That's how I'll classify them in the best of my interpretation as a security analyst.
So the commission heard the Mr. Brian Achampong, Minister of State responsible for national security, saying that he was aware of them and their deployment. They heard Mr. Kandapa, who's the Minister for National Security, say the same thing. That he's aware of that team. He even sought to explain to the commission how they are made up and how many people make up the team. Is it possible that this team could have existed all this time without the National Security Council being aware?
There's a possibility.
How on earth would that happen?
You see, if you listen closely to some of the discussions, it comes across as perhaps some of the powers that be not being aware until the issue came to limelight before they were informed. If we go by that, then that's a possibility. But in the real sense of
the
word,
two ministers responsible for national security, they say they were aware.
Yeah.
And they only report to the president and perhaps this council.
Yeah. So in that case, then there's no question about that. Then they are aware.
So what we are looking at is a situation where the National Security Council is fully aware of the operation of a militia in Ghana. That's your analysis.
Did these ministers, both of Minister for National Security and the one in the office of the President, Minister of State, did they inform at any point in time the National Security Council of the existence of this political militia? That's a question that I cannot answer. I do not know. That's why I'm saying there's a possibility. If they were informed officially or even informally, then we can say that yes. You understand what I mean?
I'm trying to follow, and I'm trying to see if there's a circumstance under which that could be possible. The IGP, whose men, some of his men are in that group, is on the National Security Council.
But you see, let's put this in a practical way. If a Minister of State in the office of President, in charge of national security, for instance, deploys that militia, I would imagine that the President must be aware. I would imagine. Okay. You were talking about possibilities. That's why I was taking into possibilities.
Fair enough.
But in my own understanding, I would. And again, for the Minister for National Security to also be aware. Then, of course, okay, it ties in with this whole thing of the DI, whatever they call it, which is operating in the castle and all that. Okay. So those places are, where if they were deployed, and they were doing what they were doing, they wouldn't do it without their consent. And these are people appointed by the president.
I have another question for you, but I'll ask it in a minute. First, I want to share some of the messages that have been coming through while we've been chatting. This one says, it's from Timothy Isahaku, who writes to us from Ijura. He says, the president must sack the national security minister. He has failed to curtail the insecurity situation in the country, unable to find the missing Takrady girls, and also failed to ensure there was no violence in the Ayawaso by-election. And I think the Parliamentary Committee on Security should call him to Ghanaians, to account to the nation, I think is what he's saying. This one is from Kwame in Obuasi. He says, hello, Mr. Host. Hello, Kwame. Please, one of the problems in the security service is about the way and manner people are being recruited into these various agencies. Thanks for your message. This one is from Kujo in BA. Good afternoon, sir. Look, the collapse of banks in the nation is the biggest security threat so far. Mr. President, wake up. Good afternoon. I really appreciate your program, but one thing I would like to say is that our security structure is very poor, just because it's not working. Some of them are on the side of government, which is not good, and that's from Jay, who writes from Hohoy. I'll read one more. It's from Wisdom K. Grant in Kasua. It says, I think Ghana, our problem in terms of management is lack of proper description of duties. People are employed into offices, but their duties are not properly defined. The same issues are faced by our security system in this country. God help us, and that's what Wisdom has to say. I'll take a quick reaction to these messages, and then I'll ask my final question of you.
Yeah, interesting comments. Should the Minister for National Security be sacked because of kidnapping? That's a force more within the Ministry of the Interior.
Right.
And I don't know how far investigations have gone. Are they updating what efforts they have made so far? I think it's important that the police are able to get to the bottom of this. I mean, they have been given all the resources to do that. And at every point in time, they must keep people informed of what efforts are being done. Those that the public need to hear, they must make sure they make that. On the issue of recruitment, yes, there are problems. You always have sentiments getting in. And sometimes some of the people who criticize would be the same people turning around to bring their own people for employment in some of these services. So the issue is not only from the government side, we must also look at ourselves and make sure that we also do the right thing. And if everybody would do that, we wouldn't have a problem.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And then what else? There were other comments which really pointed to the fact that the system must work. People must understand the rules clearly. It's very important. Else, you just, like you're rightly saying, be working across purpose and not really doing what you are being paid to do. Okay, so those are the interesting comments, and I share them.
This is the last question I wanted to ask you. Now, before we came on set today, I wanted to have a look and see what the president had said about the kidnappings. I could find no record of any comment ever made by the president on the kidnappings. He didn't say anything about it in the State of the Nation address. He hasn't said anything about it on social media. I have no record of him saying anything at any public event, but I haven't attended every public event of the president, so I can't make it a categorical statement. But what I'm saying is I couldn't find anything that the president has said about it. Which leads me to this question. How often is the president supposed to get national security briefings? Is it daily, weekly, monthly, annually?
I would suggest that at least 3 times a week. Okay, and again, weekly, there must be some form of briefing. Perhaps but normally what happens is from the National Security Council, when there's an emergency and all that, they call meetings. But I'm sure they also have regular meetings. But the president must always be kept informed. He must have briefs at least thrice a week to keep him on top of the situation. If the president hasn't made any statement on the kidnapped girls or the missing girls, as you're saying, then I don't think it is right. Because you see, every Guardian, of course, he can't go making comment on everything, but things that gain national attention and people are interested in all that, it's important that he makes statements, because then that also gives it, the credibility that it requires, for efforts to be made to rectify the situation.
Understandable. And I suppose if we hear more often from the security apparatus, briefings and so forth, then it wouldn't be a matter of speculation whether or not the president knows about A, B, or C.
Absolutely.
For example, we would know whether the president is aware that national security has had to evict his former bodyguard from a state installation. We would know whether he's aware of this or not. Mr. Prosper Ni Norte Addo is a security analyst based in Liberia. We thank you so much for your time with us this afternoon. We appreciate it.